Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Brother Shahzad Mustafa, and I'm one of the hosts of Happy Strong Family Media projects. And today we have two very special guests. We're going to talk about some of the issues that are on the minds of our community around COVID-19. And so we brought on board today two Happy Strong Family members. First is Dr. Zaihan Rashid. Dr. Zaihan, welcome.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Dr. Zaihan Rashid is a retired general surgeon, and he's also one of the founders of Happy Strong Family. Our other guest is Sister Fozia Murtaza. Sister Fozia is specialist in offering support to individuals and groups when it comes to mental health and wellness recovery. She's been working with Happy Strong Family for a couple of years thus far. Sister Fozia, welcome.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you, Brother Shahzad, for having me.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. There are really two major things which we're hearing from the community. One is this vaccine. So the vaccine is coming out. There's a number of different manufacturers of the vaccine. There's a lot of confusion as to what does this vaccine do? What are some of the side effects of this vaccine? Should I take it? Is it halal? The second thing that is extremely important, the effect on our mental health and wellness is a huge issue. If you go on the media, you'll see that mental health issues have risen considerably. There's a lot of tension in the homes. People are feeling depressed. They're feeling a lot of anxiety. Their lives have been disrupted. So we're going to talk to Sister Fozia and getting some guidance from her on how to take care of our own mental well-being. So Dr. Rashid, can we dive in? Are you ready?
Inshallah.
So there's a lot of questions that people come up. People are saying, on the one hand, lots of hope. Oh, COVID's over. I can take off my mask. I can get back to normal life. I can go and travel. Inshallah, a couple of months, this will all be over. The vaccine is here. We're all good, right? Is that a realistic expectation? On the other hand, people are going crazy over this vaccine. Oh, it's a way of, it's going to alter our DNA. It's a population control tool. It's going to control our minds. This is, Big Brother trying to just control us. So can you just educate us a little bit about this vaccine? What is a vaccine? How does it work? And what should we expect out of it, inshallah, over the next few months?
Jazakallah khair, Brother Shahzad. You're absolutely right. This is an ongoing topic, and I think it has engendered a lot of interest. And for the purpose of making things a little bit more visual, I felt we should look at perhaps the vaccine itself and just quickly go over some of its, as you mentioned, what's in it, what is done to make it, what are the potential side effects of it, what's not in them, etc. So I'll address these two vaccines that are out in the market, available. They're not available to the general public in that sense yet, but I think it's important to know that both are messenger RNA, and we'll go over this messenger RNA business in a slide also, just to explain what that means. But there are medicinal ingredients in it, which is the mRNA, the messenger RNA, which is a component of the cell, the smallest thing that we have in our bodies. But this particular messenger RNA is just that. It's actually making a message available to our bodies so the body can actually address the issue at hand. The non-medicinal ingredients, and you can see them, they're there. There's slight differences in the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. But you can see that there is nothing there of any concern in terms of the halal component of things. There's no, if you like, gelatin component, for example, which is our concern for a lot of people. There is no fetal tissue in there, which is also something that has regularly been mentioned. There's no microchips in there. And yes, you're right. I've been getting the same WhatsApp messages that everybody else is. So I felt it's important to put this in one slide where people can take a note to say, these things are not in the vaccine. There's no formaldehyde, there's no alcohol component. There is what's called polyethylene glycol. That sometimes confuses people. That's what's highlighted in the first column. If you look down the Pfizer vaccine, the non-medicinal ingredients includes the polyethylene glycol 2000. Don't worry if you don't pronounce the name too well. It's not an alcohol. It's actually a variety of a sugar. And you can see the same thing present in the Moderna vaccine as well. So this is just to introduce the idea that we have nothing obviously haram in any of the the two well-known vaccines. What is polyethylene glycol? Most of us really don't need to worry about it too much. We will ask about things that are allergic or anaphylaxis that may have occurred to somebody. So, if, for example, somebody's allergic to extra strength Tylenol, or they're allergic to something like Benadryl. These are things that people understand quite well. Those things would be the ones that the family physician or whoever is going to administer the vaccine should be alerted to. But otherwise, really, there's no reason to be concerned about this very small component of the dye of the vaccine. How does it work? Well, it basically works by teaching our cells how to manufacture a protein that will trigger an immune response. That's really how they work. And this does not use the live virus at any time. So there is no issue of the virus ever coming into the vaccine itself. The body will basically be encouraged to make photocopies, if you like, just to make the matter easier. A photocopy of the original, which is introduced into the body, will make antibodies, which will help us fight the infection if the virus ever enters our body. What is RNA? What is messenger RNA? Well, it's ribonucleic acid. It's a molecule that provides the cells with instructions for making proteins. Proteins are really the antibodies, the, if you like, soldiers that defend us in the case of an emergency, and which is what a virus infection would be. What is a messenger RNA? These vaccines, the vaccine's basic component, it contains the instructions for making the spike protein. So if you can imagine, the virus is like a round ball with little things sticking out of it. Those are the spike proteins. It is the instruction that the vaccine will be given to make that particular spike protein. This protein is found on the surface of the virus, which causes COVID-19. I didn't put up a photo of the COVID-19 because I think everybody's seen it so many times. If you imagine something like a ball with little spikes projecting out of it, that's what the virus looks like. So what is happening with the vaccine is that the virus vaccine, the antivirus vaccine, I should say, is actually being instructed to make antibodies against these little spikes that are projecting out of it. When we get the vaccine, the cells read the instructions just like a recipe, just like a photocopier, and they produce the same protein over and over again and again. And by the way, this is not something unique. Whenever we've met a virus in the past, that same set of events take place inside our body. The body deals with that, if you like, outside invader, breaks it down, and ultimately takes care of it by getting rid of the body, of the virus. And what is left after this particular vaccination is done is that the cell, which is deliberately being given the instructions, displays the protein piece on its surface. So these new instructions, which have been given to the cell by virtue of developing antibodies, this protein piece will project out from every cell in the body, so that the immune system, the one that defends us against obviously external threats, recognizes that this protein doesn't belong there. And this protein is therefore what immune response is developed to. And from there comes the antibodies. How is the vaccine given? There is a small dose, 0.5 mil, it's a very small dose. It is given into any big muscle, preferably the muscle of the arm. And you will need to get 2 doses, 1 month apart. The trial, and this is really where the concern is, so people say, well, it has taken too short a period of time. How did this vaccine come about? It's not really taken months and years. It's actually taken a few, 8 to 12 weeks to have the vaccine. So the trial did not actually look at whether this vaccine prevents you from contracting the COVID-19, which means you could have the infection, but really the issue that is on hand is, does it make you sick from it? And it's a very important distinction to make, that the disease occurrence is what the trial looked at. When people were given vaccines, the evidence was collected to see people who got the vaccine versus people who didn't get the vaccine. What actually happens to them in terms of occurrence of the disease? So all of those who are listening to this, please recognize that there's a very important distinction. The trial that Pfizer carried out before the vaccine was introduced looked at the prevention of the disease. There's a difference between infection and the disease. So The next issue that most people ask is, what are the risks of receiving the vaccine? I try and point out to say, please look at the risks of not receiving the vaccine also, because you're not looking at some minor issue. So first, let's look at the common side effects, which can happen to anybody who receives any vaccine. And since the vaccines that are most common, most of us, maybe not all of us, but the people who are older, the people who are prone to, for some reason, to flu, the people who just want to prevent getting into a state of illness. The flu vaccine is promoted every fall, and the flu vaccine is pretty much a new vaccine every year, because the virus changes its if you like infectivity, because it's changed itself a little bit every year. So things like local injection sites, a bit of redness, a little bit of tiredness, a headache, a fever, etc. These are the things you can expect from any virus vaccine. Any vaccine is really the right word. So really, this COVID virus vaccine is no different. Now, I want to quickly mention to people what are the actual statistics. In Canada, the total number of people infected are 627,000. And the people who number died are 16,000, just over 16,000. These, by the way, are from the Canada statistics, Canada Health. And then the US statistics have come from the Center of Disease Control, CDC. And there, of course, the number of people infected is 21 million and over. And the number of people who died is about 365,000 something. Now, another question that comes very commonly is, why and how did the vaccine come about this quickly? Well, first of all, remembering that this condition has affected the whole world. So it has stopped the economies of pretty much every major country in the world. It has therefore caused an immense amount of resource drain. So the interest in the world getting an answer to this question was big. So imagine for a minute, this is why I've put that there, trying to run a trial for a vaccine with a budget of 10,000 versus a budget of about $1 billion. And consider the number of people working on establishing some kind of vaccine, 10 people versus 10,000 people. So therefore, if you can imagine that for a minute, that when you have a large budget, you have a team of thousands of people working, if you like, round the clock, you have a very large number of recruiting participants, you can imagine that the whole thing has been expedited in a big way. Now, what is messenger RNA? If you imagine the cell as a round ball, it has got something within it, which is an even smaller ball, which is called the nucleus. Now, this situation, normally, every cell, there is a messenger RNA, as I mentioned earlier, ribonucleic acid, a portion of the cell. It is released from this smaller ball inside the cell, the nucleus, into the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is simply a gel-like material that's contained in the ball. So I'm sorry if it's very technical, but imagine a big ball containing gel, or a balloon containing gel, or water, whatever is easier. But the cytoplasm is basically jelly-like material. Inside this balloon, imagine a smaller balloon. This smaller balloon is the nucleus. And the smaller balloon, the nucleus, is the one that's responsible for creating and setting out these messenger RNAs. What do they actually do? These are, if you like, the messengers which tell the cell what to manufacture. They are basically its FedEx, if you like. They are going to tell the cells what to do. And so producing proteins is one part of it. So it's like an instruction booklet, just like it says, for what the ribosome is to do. So ribosome is a factory, nucleus is the instructor, and messenger RNA are the go-betweens. Now, it actually doesn't last very long. It actually gets broken very quickly. So that's the reason there's a very big possibility that the vaccine may have to be given again, not just twice, but several times over the coming period of time. Now, the issue of, can it change your DNA? Because DNA, this is a question that's also very frequently put across. And so I want to quickly remind all of us, messenger RNA does not have any ability to go back where the DNA lives, into the nucleus. There's just no possibility of that happening. So anybody who says that either doesn't understand it, doesn't understand the cell function and the biology, or is simply out there to create, if you like, worries in the heart. It actually has no access to DNA. So the nucleus, very much like it says, is a fortified castle. So if even a scientist wanted to access DNA within the nucleus, they will have to do something to break the cell apart to allow this protein to enter into the nucleus. So messenger RNA, which breaks up literally within a few days, absolutely has no chance of getting in there.
Yeah, so I mean, one question that does come up. So does this mean that once I, get my vaccine, I can just take off my mask and be happy-go-lucky and go back to my normal life?
Jazakallah khair. So again, I think that's a very, very relevant issue. What we are looking at is two things. We are preventing the disease from occurring in the individual, which means the manifestation of COVID-19 symptoms, which means fever, which means cough, which means infection that goes to the lungs, ventilators, difficulty breathing, all of that. So the answer to that question is yes, the vaccine has been precisely developed to prevent those symptoms from occurring. Now, the question number two is, which you didn't ask, but I think that's what's implied, does the vaccine prevent transmission of infection? I think that's what's underlying that question. And the answer is, unfortunately, no. There is no clear proof that transmission of the actual virus is prevented. So let me go back one step. Let's say somebody had an infection before already. Before they got the vaccine, they had already had the infection. Because remembering, there will be people who will not develop the antibodies necessary to be able to protect themselves, even though they'd had the infection. I hope that's not too confusing to understand. It's not automatic that if somebody has had the full symptoms, that they will necessarily be now free of this virus ever happening to them again. That's not true. There's no, unfortunately, hard evidence. There's not been long enough that we can say that with certainty. So to make it easier, that phenomenon has not been studied to say if a person develops the infection, is there no possibility of them ever getting the infection? The short answer is we don't know. So the same by, if you like, secondary assumption, not assumption, by secondary deduction, the fact that if you take the vaccine, physicians would not be able to say to you, now you don't need to protect yourself. Because remember, infection is not just happening from you. Others can give you that infection also. So because a large number of people will be unvaccinated for the foreseeable future, because there simply isn't that amount of vaccine available. So to make the answer very short is, no, you will still have to remain on your guard and do all that you need to do to protect others, even if it's not to protect yourself. I hope it's not too confusing.
Sure. Well, thank you, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Rashid, for that very informed discussion around the vaccine. And I think, we encourage our viewers to learn more about the vaccine by consulting reputable websites, talking to your physicians and so on, rather than, the latest WhatsApp message. I think that's vitally important as Muslims to be informed of the facts using science and reputable sources, inshallah. So let's switch over to Sister Fozia. Sister Fozia, this discussion that we're going to have with you is vitally important because I guess I'm not the only one to observe, whether it be myself, my own family, but definitely what I'm also reading in the media is that there is a lot of stress on the mental well-being of people during this pandemic. In your, I guess from your vantage point, what are you seeing as the kinds of mental health and wellness problems that are occurring in families and individuals, and why are these occurring?
Okay, wow, Shahzad, that's a great question. I think as humans, the thing that we have fear around is uncertainty. And so when something like a worldwide pandemic hits, it can stir up a lot of fear and anxiety of not knowing what's coming, not knowing what's going to happen, because at least for us in our lifetime, this is the first time that we're experiencing something that's affected the whole world, and we're seeing countries shut down. So when you have that, and it's part of human nature, the unknowing creates fear, it creates uncertainty. The uncertainty creates anxiety. And so what we're finding is people are being bombarded again with all this misinformation that we're talking about. and they are exposed to it. Some of them 24/7. Some people feel that they need to catch each and every headline to find out the minute by minute play of what's going on with this. And it can, we don't realize the effect that it has on our mental health. And when your mental health is affected, it has a direct connection to your physical health and your emotional and your spiritual. So what we need to do is we need to be very mindful of the information that we allow ourselves to be exposed to. There are reputable sites that we can go to get the information. If you want to catch the news headline, that's great, but you don't need to catch every single station and every, throughout the day. And the other thing I really want to bring the attention to is, yes, we're going through a pandemic, and it's an uncertain time, it's a scary time, it's a hard time, and we're all doing the best that we can to deal. But let's go back a little bit and to before the pandemic hit, before the lockdown, and let's look at what our lives were like, and let's really examine how things have changed. So the one thing that everyone was looking for before this happened, before we even knew about, COVID-19 and the coronavirus, was we don't have enough time, right? And then everything got shut down. And what did we find? Everyone has more time than they know what to do with. And so when you have more time and you don't know what you're doing with it, because now you've let go of your daily routines. And for some people, it wasn't a choice. They, lost their jobs, unfortunately, and things really became, shut down, and we're in a lockdown, and we're in the homes with our family. And so we get up in the morning, and we don't really have a plan for how we're going to spend the day. And what happens is we have a lot of conflict, a lot of interaction with each other, a lot of, that feeling of where are my days going? What am I doing with my time? And so one of the best ways that we can deal with all of this is put in place routines. Daily routines are so important to our survival. And even before COVID happened, if we look, we all had daily routines. And it's not just going to work or going to school that creates a daily routine, but in our life, even as Muslims, I mean, we were prescribed prayer 5 times a day. Why is that? It's to help us break down the day and plan around those prayer times. And so what we're learning from that is the importance of planning our day. And so even though you may not be working, you can still have a morning routine. When you wake up, how do you spend your first hour? Besides the personal hygiene, take your time for, we have our morning salah. So we take our time to connect with our creator. Then take some time to really plan out maybe what you're going to get accomplished that day. Take some time to do some reading. Take some time to do some exercise. Go and figure out how you're going to eat and nourish yourself that day. Because if we don't have a plan and we don't have the routines in place, the day we'll be at the end of the day and we'll be like, oh my God, I didn't do anything today. What happened? And that in itself can create anxiety, and that can continue to build. And before you know it, it's been a day, 2 days, a week, 3 weeks, and you feel like it's way out of control. So let's take back control of the things that we are able to choose how we respond to. Let's take back the control that we have, and let's not worry about being in control of things that are outside of our control. So although we have a situation where people are going through this pandemic and lockdown, and we don't know what's happening, what we do know is we get to choose how we spend our day. We get to choose where we put our attention. We get to choose how much information we're going to allow ourselves to absorb. We have control of so many things. And if we start to focus on those things, it starts to train the mind. And we can distance ourselves from our thoughts of fear and anxiety because our focus is on the things that we've planned for ourselves to accomplish each day.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's very insightful, Sister Fozia. I think the idea of personal routine, of the personal, the individual, him or herself, establishing a routine, thinking about control, things that they can control, and focusing on those are very useful tactics. The other element of mental health and wellness that come up is the interpersonal element. So I'm in a house. I'm in a house with my kids. My kids are are doing school remotely. Everyone's in there. The food's there. Sometimes we're in our faces. And sometimes we can start getting on each other's nerves, which then builds up anxiety, which builds up frustration. I think I saw recently on one of the mainstream news channels that the amount of marital breakups have gone up during COVID-19. Maybe because people are beginning to see each other more than they would like to, right? So how do we deal with the interpersonal element of the lockdown, remote work from home, work remotely kind of environment that we're in these days?
That's a great question. So let's look at it this way. Each and every one of us has a level of tolerance. Let's just say that we have a window of tolerance, okay? And when we're within the window, things can be going on. We can have some stress, but we feel like we can manage it. We're able to handle what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's when the stress and the trauma starts to shrink that window of tolerance that it's going to start to affect and throw us off our balance. It's going to start to affect us, right?
Mhm.
And so when that window of tolerance starts to shrink, we may, everyone experiences stress and trauma differently. So for some people, they become very angry, they become, overwhelmed, and it's like a hyper arousal, right? And then for some people, they become very numb, they shut down, they want to disconnect. So it's like a hypo-arousal, right? And what we need to understand is that what's really happening is that it's affected our window of tolerance. And this behavior that we're having is not something that we feel that is in our control. It's not something that we can just turn on or turn off because it's now beyond our capacity to deal with the amount of stress and the trauma that we feel we're going through. So what we can do is we can start to work with, if someone wants to work with a doctor or with a coach or a practitioner, health practitioner, and you can actually put some strategies in place to widen that window of tolerance. So you become more you sort of create those strategies for yourself, and you have like these tactics that allow you to deal with stress much better. That's one thing that we're finding is that people aren't aware that what's happening and their thoughts around what's happening is pushing us outside of our window of tolerance. So we need to really look at that, and we need to look at what we can do to either expand the window of tolerance, but at the same time put in place strategies so that we can understand the thought process and also understand that the thoughts around our anxiety aren't always true. The thoughts that we tell ourselves are often just a perception or an interpretation of what's going on. And we sometimes tend to catastrophize, and it may not be that much of a big deal, but we in our mind think it is. And so we behave and react that way. The other thing that's really important for us to be mindful about is, yes, we are locked into the homes with our families 24/7. And although we love our families, we may not love being in each other's faces 24/7. It's important for us to take the time to have our solitude. It's important for us to understand the importance of setting healthy boundaries and having conversations with our family members so that we're able to, if you need to every day, whether it's in the morning, during the day, in the evening, but you let your family know, I need to go to my quiet spot. I need to take some time to myself and just be with yourself do something that you really enjoy, whether it's a craft or whether it's just, you know, playing a video game on your device, something that's going to really allow you to just be with yourself and not have to be again with everyone else and dealing with all of this information that's coming at us from everywhere. So setting those healthy boundaries, having those conversations, being mindful of how we're spending our time, what we're allowing ourselves, the information that we allow to be absorbed into our minds, all of these things are going to have an effect on us. The other thing is, you know, you were talking about meals. It's so important for us to understand the importance of eating to nourish the body, not just eating for the sake of snacking because we're home and we can just go to the kitchen and snack all the time.
Oh yeah.
But let's be mindful of what we're putting in our body. I mean, a lot of us, we love a lot of different types of foods, but ask yourself if that food loves you back. Because if the food doesn't love you back, then maybe you need to, you know, distance yourself from it a bit. But the reason I want to bring this up is because nourishing our body and how we choose to nourish our body and really focusing on having a proper sit down meal time with the family, maybe, you know, having breakfast together. These are things that were not luxuries that we had before COVID. And now when everyone is at home, let's take advantage of the things that we are able to do, because that also creates gratitude. We can be grateful for that family time because, you know, that was the one thing that everyone had, was that we were so busy and caught up in our lives, and we were passing each other, family members, like, you know, ships in the night. And we didn't have the opportunity to sit down and have a game night with your kids and you know, like sit down and just discuss life with your kids and talk to them about what's important to them. And we have the opportunity now to give the attention and really nurture those relationships. And that's something that's going to create stronger relationships and stronger bonds with our family. But it's also going to teach our children to take the opportunity to fill our time with things that we can be grateful for. Yeah, another thing I really want to focus on is the importance of even journaling. We are all going through so many different emotions, and we have good days and we have some more challenging days. And I think journaling, just, you know, before you go to bed at night, have a gratitude journal. Write down 3 things every night before you go to bed that you were grateful for that day. And what that does, again, it starts to train the mind to look for those things that you're going to be grateful for, because you know you're going to be writing about it at the end of the day. And this is what, you know, in Quran and Sunnah, alhamdulillah, this is like what we've been taught, is that there's always something to be grateful for, but it's up to us to look for it.
No, that's a wonderful and the message that you're giving at the end here is, and it really nicely ties up your sort of presentation. It's just the idea of being grateful and being aware of the positives that are happening in our lives, and training the mind, like you're saying, training the mind to look for those positives, because it's very easy for the mind to gravitate towards the negative and stay focused on the negative. And I think, like you're saying very correctly, it builds up this negative momentum towards anxiety and mental stress that
Absolutely.
many of us do face.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, with all of this going around, I hear like a lot of conversation that happens is, why is this happening to us? Why is this happening to me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if we shift that, you know, that thinking, if we can shift that thinking, instead of focusing on why is this happening to me and why is this happening to us, to this is happening for me and this is happening for us. And what we're doing is we can say, all right, you know what? Whatever difficulty we go through, it's not something that's happening to you, but it's happening for you. Because, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always will put us in situations where we are nudged to the direction that He has planned for us. You know, each and every one of us was created with a plan, His plan, and we have a purpose. that we have to serve and fulfill in this life. And oftentimes we get so caught up in our own head that we fail to recognize that all of these things that are happening for us. They're happening for us to become stronger. They're happening for us to become more resilient and more patient. They're happening because we're in a situation where we need to get out of that situation. So the cycle will continue until we choose differently to get out of that situation. And so all of these things, if we change the focus to being a victim of why is this happening to me, to the focus of being really solution focused and really grateful to, I'm so grateful that this is happening and these are the opportunities I have right now. Let me avail these opportunities. It really, again, helps to shift our mindset, and it helps to train the brain to look for those things so that we can recognize everything that happens. Allah is doing for us to guide us in the direction where we are planned to go. And it's His plan.
MashaAllah, this is very beautiful and eloquently explained conclusion, Sister Fozia. Thank you so much. I think we're out of time. And I want to thank Dr. Rashid and Sister Fozia again for attending this video dialogue. Maybe we should just call it that. And I hope everyone can derive some benefit from it. Please, I'm asking our audience to give Happy Strong Family some feedback. If you like this kind of content, please let us know, and we'll try to create more content similar to this type. Other topics that you might be interested in, we'll be glad to get more speakers and more presenters who can present to those topics. Otherwise, thank you very much.